Good morning.
Hey, Jerusalem, how are you?
I am well. I'm well. How are you?
I'm really well this week. Normally I say well, and I think that's just like my homeostasis, but I'm really well this week.
You're
So
actually like this
actually well,
well.
like not just COVID well. I am well.
Yes, yes. No, that's good.
Yeah,
That's good. Yeah, I think I'm the same way. It's just always different. I don't know,
yeah,
but yeah, yeah. So here we are. All right. Well, let's start with the good. Tell me
yes.
something good this week. What is good for you?
Yeah, so I got this reputation at my former congregation for like always having a book on hand and like always like recommending books to people. And I know the last time we did this, I was talking about the presiding bishop's really good book, which I'm still reading. But my good thing this week is another book that I just stumbled across, and it's actually right back here on my shelf, called The End of Memory, remembering rightly in a violent world. And it's really all about like forgiveness and why we should remember, and what it means as Christian people who are called to love our enemies to actually remember things rightly and justly. And so there's all these concepts in it which I've been wrestling with in the context of like everything that's happening around us. Like, what does it mean to actively love our neighbor, to love our enemies? What does it mean to be people of love? And I know those are very hard questions to wrestle with. And so this book is like really rocking my world and helping me wrestle through those questions in a really good way. So that's my good thing, is like just reading books that are just really feeding me and nourishing my soul, like in a really deep way. And I think that contributes to why I'm really well this week, is because attending to your soul, like how is your soul doing? Like feeding your soul. And so this book has really helped me get there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that question right there about like how do we actually love our neighbors well? Like there was a lot of chatter the last couple of weeks just through different things that have been going on in the church about who we can listen to or who we should listen to,
Yeah.
and like from different traditions, not just
Yeah.
different faiths but different traditions.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been coming up is that we're supposed to love, right?
Yeah.
But what does that look like? And I think, I grew up in a different faith tradition. I
Yeah.
have very close family members that still believe very differently than me, and they believe they're being loving.
Yeah.
Like they believe that their interpretation of what it means
Right.
to follow Jesus and his way of love looks
Yeah.
different than mine. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really hopeful that we can, even as a church, begin to have that bigger conversation. Like,
Yeah.
how do we boil that down and decide? And how does that change how we interact with people who interpret love differently? Because you
Yeah.
just say, that we follow love. Well, that's
Right.
great. And
Right. Right.
I need a caveat of what
Yeah.
that means. Like, I need
Yeah.
like, and I interpret love to mean,
Right.
right?
Well, that's the hard part, right? Is that like everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. Like it's not like somebody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to do the wrong thing today. And because everyone thinks they're doing the right thing, that's what makes this work so difficult, because you can't just tell someone to do the right thing. There's a deeper conversation that has to happen there. There's so much more deeper conversation and transformation that is required in this work.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Oh, man, big stuff.
What's your good thing?
Oh, my good thing is totally not deep in any way this week. But so I love to decorate and work on our, we have a fixer upper house and a fixer upper farm, and we're always working on it. And sometimes like I'll make one change and it's like pulling the thread on a sweater for me. Like, okay, so I've always wanted to have a dining room bench, like a bench at the backside of our dining room table, so that it's just, I don't know, mostly so I can put more pillows on it, because I need another place to put pillows. And so I found a bench. Well, then I got the bench home because I bought it off Facebook Marketplace, and it didn't quite fit with the table we had, which we've been discussing getting a different table for a long time. This was kind of like that impetus. Okay, now it's time for different reasons. so then we started looking, and then we decided to build the table. Like my husband and I decided to build our dining room table together. And so that's just been a fun project to work on together. And also, I mean, we're very romantic about it in the sense that we're like, maybe this will become a family heirloom and our grandkids will love it. And I'm like, or maybe they'll just sell it in a garage sale. But it's been really fun to work on the project and just to know that we are making it ourselves. And, you know, for us, the table's so important. And I know you're the same way, right? It's kind of at the heart of my ministry in so many ways. And so, yeah, it's just it's just been a good thing to work on that together. And it's just, we've been married almost 24, 25, I've lost count how many years. But I can tell you probably the first decade at least, we would not have been able, this would not be a good thing to do together. So it's also really neat that we've gotten to that point, especially after being together all through COVID.
Well, I mean, I think working on things like that are just there's something so neat and cool and just, I mean, you said it wasn't deep, but I think that is actually really deep. Like putting your own personal touch on something, it would just be easy enough to go, you know, online to target.com or something and order a table, you know, but to go through the extra length of putting that effort in to build something yourself, I think that is so cool to do that. It makes it your own.
It will absolutely be our own, and we're making it our specifications. Like, Anyway, okay. Well, enough about tables. I could talk about this all day long, but let's bring on our guest.
Yes,
Isaac Everett.
Hello.
Hey, Isaac.
It's so good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Well, welcome. And let's just jump right in. If you'll introduce yourself, and you're here to talk about a ministry, or I don't know if you'd call it a ministry, a community called CRECHE. Is that that's correct, right?
Yeah, we're a ministry and a community.
Okay, great. If you'll just jump in and tell us about who you are and what it is and how you relate to each other.
Yeah, so my name is Isaac Everett, and I'm in Boston, and I'm one of the people who founded a ministry and community called CRECHE, which stands for the Charles River Episcopal Co-Housing Endeavor. And I love the intro that you two had, because the question of how do we love other people and also how do we care for our homes, I'm just like, wow, what better intro for intentional community than that? So we're a network of intentional communities, right? Which is groups of people, intergenerational and mixed income, across some significant lines of difference, choosing to live together like families, sharing meals, sharing rhythms of prayer, sharing the rhythms of home maintenance, all those kinds of things, predominantly as a way to deepen our own discipleship, that believing that living in this way is calling us into better versions of ourselves, calling us into deeper gospel work, and also as a direct answer to the housing crisis, which is strangling the Boston housing market and making it really, really difficult for people to live in the communities they love. So that's kind of the broad overview of who we are and what we're doing. We launched a couple of years ago. We've found one new intentional community per year for all 4 years of our existence. And I don't know how long we're going to sustain that, but it's one of the most exciting ministries I've ever gotten to be a part of.
That's such a cool, and I'm using the word cool a lot today. I don't know where that's coming from. I feel like I'm in like the 90s. But that's, as you sort of talk about that, like I immediately began thinking about when you connected it to like discipleship, like I immediately began thinking about the New Testament and the way that like the earliest Christians like they would hear the gospel, they would be baptized, and they're like, let's be together, like all the time, like as a community. And so as you have engaged in this kind of ministry, I wonder what you have learned about where the growing edge for the institutional church is versus what you're learning in your community, and how and if you've shared that learning with others.
Gosh, that is a huge question. So first, you're absolutely right that home-based worship is pervasive in the New Testament. You know, it's like every time we see Christians gathering, for the most part, it's in someone's home, and often they're named as the person hosting. And that center of the household as a body of church is something that I think we've lost over the centuries, as we've taken pretty much every major act we do as a community, including a Eucharistic meal, and we've moved it out of the home and into the church. And I think that has not always served us well, because in times like 2020, in a pandemic, when we lose access to the church building, I think we're less equipped than other faith traditions are to have our spirituality rooted in our homes. You know, like if you go to a Passover Seder, it's in someone's house. You go to a Shabbat dinner, it's in someone's house. There are traditions that have been training themselves for centuries to encounter God in their homes, out of necessity, and we haven't. Although that's one of the things that I think CRECHE has done really well, is for me, watching churches, parishes try to figure out how to navigate Holy Week during a pandemic, and then watching intentional communities just like doing it. I was like, oh wow, this is so full of hope and joy for me. What can the institutional church learn? I think there's a couple things. There's a lot of things I'd love to say, but I'll hold myself to a few. One of them, I think, is that because of that shift, I think in a lot of ways, the institutional church has forgotten how to think of the church in ways other than parishes. And so when we close parishes, we can't see that as anything other than a failure or a death. We have difficulty honoring and supporting and allocating resources to non-parochial ministries, seeing them as part of the larger ecology of church. And that's something where I think missions and chaplaincies and monastic communities and intentional communities, groups like CRECHE, like it's possible, and in prior centuries we did have a really robust ecology of church with many different access points for many different vocations. And one of those particular ways of being church has become dominant in 20th and 21st century America, to our detriment.
Wow. Yeah, Marcus and I could go down this rabbit hole very easily.
Yes, we could.
I don't see the whole time telling the church what's wrong with the church, but there we go.
Bring it on. So you just kind of touched on this briefly, but as you said, watching Holy Week last year in 2020, and watching your CRECHE community navigate Holy Week differently than the wider church, right, with more institutionalized expressions. How else did COVID affect your communities? And what did you learn about even how to do this work during a pandemic? Maybe it didn't change at all. Maybe that was the thing you learned. Like, we're just right. But I don't know. I mean, I suspect that's not the truth. But what can you tell us about that?
COVID affected us a lot. Yeah, so one of the things that COVID has done is really force us to learn how to have kind of hard conversations with each other. And those are skills that we have learned because, living with each other is hard, right? And you talk to any monk or any nun, and they will tell you that it's hard, but worth it. But everything from, dishes left in the sink to overnight guests to playing music too loudly, it's hard, and you have to have conversations and have to learn those skills. And if you can't talk about the things that feel a little bit mundane and silly, then you can't talk about the big things, like I'm concerned that your behavior in the pandemic is putting my health at risk, right? Which is like a really big conversation to have as a community, and figuring out how to talk about what our real needs are, both in terms of physical safety and in terms of mental health and professional requirements and all those sorts of things, has been a real challenge. And I think we've emerged the stronger for it, but we're not unscathed. The other thing that the pandemic has done is just a lot of people have lost their jobs. So we had to be, the way that CRECHE is structured is to live in a CRECHE house is much cheaper than to live in, a market rental, but it's not free. And so when somebody loses their job because of COVID, we get to say, well, what do we do about that? How do we care for this person? Are we the kind of people who are going to rely on an eviction moratorium to tell us our morality? And figuring out how to have like real talk about financial needs and to really care for each other has been a journey, and a really, really rewarding one. And I'm proud to say no one has had to leave a CRECHE house because of financial difficulty during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I am extremely proud of that. The community stepped up, our donors stepped up, everybody stepped up. We're doing good.
Yeah. There's one, I want to put a pin there and come back to that, because there's something really deep that I think you just touched on, which is the ability of these communities to have these kinds of conversations that frankly the church is not very good at having. Like, the only time we bring up money in church is stewardship season. And even that is a very stilted conversation. And it's not even really a conversation. It's this awkward ask that we don't really know how to navigate very well. And so I want to put a pin and come back to talk about how, like, the way that this community is really, in my opinion, like really teaching us how to be a community together. But I want to back up because I realize I jumped over something that I think is important to establish, which is, what is an intentional community? Like, I hear this word a lot. And honestly, I hear some people describe something that feels really compelling to me. And then I hear other people describe something that really isn't compelling. And I'll just name to you, when I hear people that say the compelling thing, it is people living in the intentional communities. When I hear the people not saying the compelling thing, it's somebody like in the institution trying to describe to other people in the institution what an intentional community is. So what is an intentional community?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't actually love the word, because intentional is a very vague term and community is a very vague term, and you put them together and they don't become less vague, right? So, like, my gym is an intentional community. My church is an intentional. But anyway, that's the term we've all settled on, so that's what I'm going to run with.
Yeah.
The way that I use the term is faith-based, or at the very least, values-based co-housing. So people who are sharing a home, who are making choices that are in direct opposition to the materialism and other forms of oppression in our world, by reducing their ecological imprint, by choosing interdependence over independence, by deeply investing themselves in each other emotionally and spiritually. It's, in the queer community, it's often described as a chosen family. And that's, I think, a really beautiful way to think about it. Intentional community is choosing to be seen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by other people. Folks who are going to know what you look like before you shower, people who are going to hear how snippy you get when you're grumpy. Like, you can't hide. It's choosing to inconvenience yourself because other people need you. It's choosing to pick people up from work and, pay for things that other people need. It's choosing to care for other people's family members and other people's children. It's saying, I will not just share my home with you, but I will take you as my own. And it's something that I think is deeply Christian, because chosen family also pervades the Bible. The last thing that Jesus does on the cross is look at John and Mary and say, like, this is your mom, this is your son, I'm creating a chosen family. And yet, 2,000 years later, that's still a deeply countercultural thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So in that awareness of intentional community, and that is a beautiful description. That's up there with the compelling ones, just FYI. But as you talk about that, there is something, as you described it, what I'm thinking of is sort of, there are little bits and pieces to this that I think frankly, the entire church, as you talked about, is actually called to live into to varying degrees. But because we live in a society where like religion lives in this silo, and frankly, religion lives in this building, and we relegate all the religious things over there, and my life exists in this building, i.e. my house, and never the two shall meet. We've lost a lot of that. We've lost the ability to really care for one another, to really deeply engage with one another. And as I hear you talk about intentional community, that really feels like good news to me, because even historically, like when we think historically, like whenever the pillars of society were falling apart, the thing that came out of that was the Christian monastic movement. But these Christians like left society and moved into these monasteries and things of that nature, creating these kinds of communities, because that is seen as kind of the antidote to a society that is tearing us apart, a society that is diminishing us, a society that is defining our lives in ways that are opposed to the values of the kingdom of God. And so as you talk about intentional community, I really hear a revival, to borrow from our presiding bishop's word, like a revival of this call of Christianity, which is be together, love together, be community, love your neighbor, and not just love your neighbor by saying it, but like love your neighbor by like actually being a neighbor, like physically being a neighbor to someone, and all that entails.
Yeah. And so we draw a lot of inspiration from monasticism. We've got a rule of life that we live under, and it's very much inspired by the Brotherhood of St. John the Evangelist here in Cambridge. One of the people, I've lived in an intentional community for about a decade, and one of my former housemates is now a monk there, which has been just wonderful. And at the same time, I think it's worth highlighting that the very, very few people are called to be monks or nuns. Most people are called to live in a household, whether that's a nuclear family or an extended family or an intentional community. And for the most part, our congregations are made up of households. And therefore, thinking about, when I think about sort of the layers of community that I live within and breathe, I've got my marriage, which is like an intentional community of two. I've got my household, which is the people that I see every day without having to make any effort to see them. I've got my congregation, which is the people with whom I congregate, right? It's a very accurate word. And then I've got the wider church and my neighborhood and sort of the subcultures and those sorts of things. And I feel most supported and most intimately held when I have all of those layers supporting me. And so I think one of the lessons for the church is that it's not just that like some small number of us wild, crazy few are called to live in this way, but rather that household community is a layer of community that deserves the church's attention because it's part of it. And we could do a whole lot better supporting, because we have this individualist Western idea of like, your house is your castle and your family is your business. And, but it's like, it's a huge part of your life, and if God is not present in that, and if the church has nothing to offer you in that, like what is the church even doing? Right. And it's like the most Anglican thing I think I've ever said, because like what did the prayer book do, right? Like what innovation did it offer other than taking the daily office and putting in the hands of every baptized Christian?
Yes. So yes. Sorry, I've been saying that for so long. I'm so glad somebody else is saying this.
Ooh,
right?
Marcus is getting spirit.
Yes.
I never believed in the ministry of the laity. Like he believed.
Yes. Oof. Yes. Okay. So on that, a lot of people, so faith at home, which I hate that we even have to say it, right? It should just be part of it, but is a huge passion of mine. And when I started that work, I had small children. And I know a lot of people in the formation community, especially this past year, have had to think about that. They've had to think about how to help their families take ownership, dig in, these sorts of things. But a lot of what we see is geared towards people with young kids, right? Like here's and I wrote a book, like literally wrote a book about like how to craft for Jesus with your children on the liturgical calendar. So like, I get it, right? I get, yeah, I get that instinct. But now my kids are 16 and 20, right? They're practically, they're grown, and it's a different, and they are not gung-ho believers, right? They're skeptics. They're on the edges of things. They're pushing back. They're doing all the appropriate things that they should do when their mother's in ministry, right? Like when they're like 100%, they're on it, and they're challenging me, and it's great. But so I would, what resources or what models, how can we help resource the people in our church who have mixed households of various kinds, couples where it's a marriage or a partnership. Maybe it's an older parent, like if I had my grandmother living with us or my mother living with us, a multi-generational home, that faith at home isn't just for households with small children, right? That it's a lifelong endeavor. So what wisdom or resources do you have? What have you found? What structures or rituals have you found works well, especially when when everybody's not, like, I like how you say it was values-based, not even faith-based, because probably not everybody in the home is at the same place faith-wise, like in these intentional communities. So how do you navigate that? I know I just asked you like 5 questions, so pick the one you want to answer.
All right. So Ephesians, and also the examination in the ordination rite, charges clergy to be equipping the saints for ministry, right? And it's not just doing ministry, it's equipping people for ministry. A good friend of mine describes like vocational discernment is if you're do you want to be James Bond? Because James Bond is a lay person, right? Do you want to be Q? Because Q is a priest, and then M is God, right? But if you want to be the person putting the gadgets together so that James Bond can go out in the world and be awesome, then you may be your priest. But if you want to be James Bond, that's what the lady looks like. And I think we've particularly lost that because there's something deeply challenging that. And I'm a priest, right? So I get it. But when you're equipping people to do the work of the church without you present, it feels like you're making yourself unnecessary. And that's really hard for people to do. And our cathedral here in Boston did a beautiful thing for Easter Vigil and other Holy Week services, where they put together a packet and a group of resources and songs and YouTube links and everything, and then just gave it to people and says, here's how you can do Holy Saturday at home. But we're not going to try to replicate an Easter Vigil on Zoom, right? And I thought that was just a beautiful, like, our job is to equip you to pray. Our job is not to pray while you watch us, I thought I was so proud of them. And we used it here in my community also. But then the other thing is, and this is something where I think in terms of resourcing people to live in this sort of way that the church often misses, is like if you ask, before I did this job, I led a community called The Crossing here in Boston, which is a predominantly young adult community. And when people sort of wander in, often fresh out of college or for a new job or just moved to Boston, and I'd be like, well, what are you looking for? Right? Like the first question Jesus asked in the Gospel of John, what are you looking for? And the things I heard were like, well, I need an affordable place to live. I need a loving, supportive community, and I need meaningful ways to serve that align with my values. And I think that the church very often doesn't have an answer for that. And it's like, oh, wow, I hope you find those things. Meanwhile, Eucharist is at 11, see you there. But like, what if we really took seriously, like, oh, people actually don't have places to live.
Yeah.
And we're a denomination that has owned real estate in America for centuries.
Yep.
Perhaps more real estate than we actually can use at the moment as our membership dwindles. But that doesn't mean that it can't be used for gospel purpose. And that's something like to get real housing is a very resource intensive endeavor. We recently raised money to create an intentional community in the Dorchester neighborhood with a historically Black congregation. And to make housing for 6 people, we had to raise, $700,000. That's like a huge undertaking. But you need churches and institutions to look at that and say, this is worth supporting. We're in a desperate housing situation. People are getting pushed out of the neighborhoods. Communities are getting displaced. Neighborhoods are being destabilized, and we can do something about that. And not just do something about it because we're in a position of privilege, but we're actually really, really good at creating communities, right? This is what the church has done for centuries, and learning how to live together, no matter how, there's no bottom to that well in the Christian tradition, right? Like any problem you're having in a household community, someone else in Christianity has had it and has written about it, and you can read up on it. And we're in this amazing moment in time where the things, particularly the young adults in cities, are desperate for are the things that we actually have to offer. And how amazing is that?
Yeah.
So let's offer it.
Yeah. There is a lot that there's so much here that you're saying. I think that is so rich for further discussion. And I think one of the things that I thought about as you were speaking is as you said, that the incredible relevance that if the church really does want to engage in this work, the questions that people are asking and wrestling with, we are perfectly situated to help people wrestle with, to resource people's wrestling. But it does require us to do things differently, right? It's not as simple as, come to Eucharist or come to Bible study. It's something different. It's actually, how do we turn the Eucharist inside out, right? How do we actually help the church be that Eucharistic presence in the community? So it's, one of the questions that I've got a lot in this sort of COVID sort of moment, with us in my own parish has suspended Eucharist until we can actually be together and do Eucharist the way that we're accustomed to. And I've gotten people, asking questions about when are we going to have Eucharist again and things of that nature. And I was like, those are really great questions. Ask them, keep wrestling with that grief. And then also insert this question into your prayer. Who are you feeding, right? Who are you being Eucharist to? And I think one of the things that COVID, I think, is inviting, at least I'll speak for my own little congregation, is inviting my congregation to really think about is not simply how are we being fed, but how are we feeding, right? Our spiritual hunger is actually identifying a hunger in our community around us. Are we listening to those needs? Or are we so used to the old models of outreach and mission that we're here, take this sandwich and leave us alone, or take this sandwich and maybe come to this Bible study, which, I think originated from good places. I don't want to, say that those came from bad places. So I think that the questions are deeper now. The questions are different now. And I think what you're raising, Isaac, is this idea that what we're being asked to respond to in this moment requires us to turn the questions just a little bit, to see the resources that we have as assets, not as liabilities, but that requires us to see them and engage with them differently. There's just so much here. And it's just such a rich conversation. I'm so glad we're talking about this morning.
Yeah. I totally get that. And all of Eastern Massachusetts is suspended in-person worship. Which is a very hard decision that our bishop made, and I'm so proud of him and so grateful for his leadership, because I think it's the right call. And similarly to what I was talking about before, this is not the first pandemic that the church has weathered. So there's also a lot of writing by people who have lived through other plagues about how to do it. And the difference is now we've got better science to work with, but it's not like we're the first generation struggling with this. And for me, I think remembering that the Eucharist is a powerful way that we encounter the body of Christ, but it's not the only way that we encounter the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ. Your bathroom mirror is an icon, right? So use it. And just being willing to, I like that sort of reverse Eucharist that you talked about, sort of, we're not cut off from God. We're not cut off from the body of Christ. we're just caught off from this one mode of encountering God for a little while, and not for the first time.
Right. Right.
So this is amazing. I feel like we could have 10 more of these conversations and keep going. So good. But for the sake of time, so I know people who are going to watch this are going to probably have a couple of different questions. One of them will be, I want to do this, right? Like, how do I start this kind of work? What should I read? What should I watch? Where do I start? And then the second question I think that will come up is, okay, I don't feel like our church is quite there yet, our parish or my personal self. Like, I don't feel the call to actually establish this kind of work, but I want the spirit of this kind of work to infuse. I want to shift to an equipping model, right? Instead of a doing model. So what should our people, they like to read, they like to watch resources, they like to listen to podcasts, right? They want to do their research. We're a church full of fives, like, and do their research.
I'm a 3.
Yeah, I'm a 7.
I'm a 7 too.
Mark,
wow, it's just a thing.
Yeah, Isaac's gonna make sure it's excellent, and I'm like, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say, like, so where do people start if you want to look into, and I guess the first place is the why, right? The equipping, the shifting from doing to equipping. What would you suggest? Like, what has inspired you and helped form you in that work?
Yeah. So the first book that I think really lit up my imagination on this stuff was The Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne, which chronicles the starting of the Simple Way, which is sort of one of the first of this wave of new monasticism, I guess. And it definitely comes out of an evangelical mindset, so be ready for that. And there's, the 12 Marks of New Monasticism and books along those lines are really, really excellent. They're also a little bit dated. I think that we've learned a lot about anti-oppression work and being how to be anti-racist and stuff like that I would love to see it updated. There's most monastic communities have incredible resources. SSJ here has a resource on writing your own rule of life that I think is, whether you're doing that in a group or by yourself, I think is super, super helpful in terms of thinking about Christianity as a practice, and thinking about spirituality as a discipline. It's like, okay, so these are my values, these are my beliefs, this is my identity. What does that look like daily? It's really, really, especially living and breathing in the world of Protestantism, where religion and belief are so commonly used as synonyms, and just sort of breaking ourselves out of that mentality. It's like being a Christian isn't about what you believe, and wow, saying that is going to give me a lot of trouble. I'm just going to leave it.
Just blew a whole bunch of minds. Y'all will have to come back and do that a different episode.
Yeah.
Well, Isaac can ask you what he meant.
But if someone wants to start up something like what we're doing, I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to do this. But you really need 3 things, right? Like you need a congregation to hold it. You need a house, and you need people to live in it. And all of none of the CRECHE houses have come together in the same way. They've all been different. But so you can start with any one of those 3, but you kind of have to have all 3 pies come out of the oven at the same time. So if you can start with the house, you can start with people, you can start with the parish, but then you need to get the others. Usually, I mean, for us, houses is the bottleneck, right? Like every time we have an opening, we have 4 or 5 times as many people apply as we can accept. Like the hunger is there. Yeah. But housing is just super duper expensive. So one of the things I would love for the church to start thinking about is looking at your diocesan endowment, for example. Could we take $1 million of our endowment, take it out of Wall Street and put it into the real estate market and just buy a house? We're not really spending money, we're reallocating investments, because nothing is a safer investment than Boston real estate. It's Like, it's not even a bad decision financially, but then we can use that for missional purposes. If it doesn't work out, we sell the house, we've still made a profit, it's fine. And yet you pitch those kinds of ideas to churches or to dioceses, and they're just like it's so far out of their understanding of what that endowment is for that what we ended up doing to finance the St. Mary's house is everyone on our board, basically, who was mostly people under the age of 40, we all just took about a quarter to a half of our 401ks and liquidated it and put it into the house, because we're like, there's commercial banks look at what we're doing and they don't understand it, and they also want to see us charging much higher rent and institutions that would have the buying power were a little bit too far out of the box. But that's like, you can only do that trick once, right? Like, you can only pull out half of your IRA one time and do it a second time and you have no IRA, right? So we're currently trying to figure out, okay, now that we've all like really put our skin in the game, like how does the next house happen, and how does the house after that happen?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. There's so much here, I think, that can teach us, whether at whatever level you're talking about. I love how you talked about the levels of community. That's one of the things I'm going to take away from this conversation is, as I had never really intentionally thought about all those levels of community, and how to see all of those levels as in some kind of way intentional, in that I am called to engage in a level of care and support for the people in that level. So thank you for that. That's such a great piece of wisdom. And I think as our churches struggle or have success or fail or whatever, like as our churches engage in this moment, I think teaching us to see our communities that way, right? Teaching us, because so oftentimes I think parishes, and I'll speak as somebody in the parish, it's very easy to like see your mission as your parish. And by parish, I mean like the people that congregate in the physical shelter of your building. And to not really be as intentional about the people who don't congregate with you. But if we are consistently aware of all of these layers of community that we have, and to really see ourselves as being in relationship with them, that changes how we do church. And maybe it doesn't lead us down the line of like establishing a house for an intentional community, but it does lead us down some kind of other really missional, really wonderful, deep relationship with somebody else in our community that we might have been tempted to overlook because we didn't see them as part of our community in a really clear way. So that's great wisdom. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And the tools that work in one will apply to the others, right?
Yeah.
So before we launch a community, I meet with the group for about a year, usually about twice a month, for a full year to really do the deep work that will survive. And it's a lot like premarital counseling, like you're just like, hey, like what in the household that you grew up in, how did people fight? What did you do you embody that? How did people talk about money? How full did the kitchen trash get before it got taken out? All those kinds of, like, let's really figure out what assumptions we're bringing into this so that we can actually then build some shared expectations. And when you have, like, I think that kind of internal work is critical for a healthy marriage. It's also really critical for a healthy intentional community. And if we could have those conversations at the congregational level, think how resilient our congregations would be.
Yeah, that's amazing. There are 3 resources that come to mind around all of this, and we'll put these in the show notes. And then we're gonna have to wrap up because it's Monday. But there's and you may have seen this book. It's called Becoming and Belonging. It's by Mark and Lisa Scandrett, and it's set around, to a certain degree, a household, a family of whatever that looks like, and maybe speaks a little bit about kids, but it has a lot of those questions. Like, I feel like any group could take that book and go through it and translate it right to their household or their small group or their intentional community. And then there's another one called How the Body of Christ Talks. And it's again about figuring out how to have those hard conversations as people who are committed to each other through faith. And then the third thing is that in the Evangelism 101 packet, we have like a worksheet where you can begin to figure out those circles, those, and it leads you through thinking, and they're termed in kind of like missional ways, and that the people's closest to you are called the Jerusalem, which is not confusing for me at all. And the next ring is like Judea, and the next ring Samaria, and then the ends of the earth, right? But it walks you through how to identify and think about who's in those communities, how you want to engage with them. So we'll link to all those in the show notes as extra resources. But Isaac, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
What you're doing and what you're teaching us, and we'll have all your contact information in the show notes as well if people want to get in touch with you. And this has been so inspiring. This has been
sure
such good news.
Yeah.
Thank you for being interested in what we're doing. I love this work. I love doing it in the Episcopal Church. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll be talking again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Bye, Isaac.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That was, it was another one of those conversations where I'm like, how quickly can I type all these notes? Because I have so many of them.
I know. I'm already going, okay, so what can we do? And all the wheels are turning already.
I mean, it's one of those things, I think, the simplicity, we talked about this a couple episodes ago, but oftentimes the ministry that God invites us to it meets a simple physical need, but goes beyond just, oh, here's a place to live. It goes, how do we make community out of this? How do we speak to a deeper way of being together out of this need, right? And so I think there's something there, I think, that the church can really respond to, because we are, in theory, set up to meet those deeper needs, not just feeding people. That's a good thing to do, but how do we go deeper than that? How do we go deeper than just providing shelter to providing community? There's so much there, I think, that as churches seek to engage their contexts in this COVID space, in the post-COVID space, whatever it is, there is a physical need right outside of the church door, frankly, inside of our church doors, to be honest, but there's a physical need right there that can be the launching pad, the launching point to a deeper, more vibrant engagement with the mission of God around us.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I just keep thinking, especially in terms of evangelism work.
Yeah.
What if our first question was, what do you need? Instead of, here's what we have. Right. And thinking about equipping versus doing. Yeah. And how to, I just think it would be amazing to talk about equipping versus doing, and to talk to people that you won't, he named that fear that I know priests, clergy have, which is I'm going to work myself out of a job. Yep. You're not. Right. Because all the people you equip are going to still need pastoring and care and equipping and inspiration, right? Right. So you might actually create more jobs. Right. The more people you equip, the more they need to be pastored and led. And so it would have, I think, the opposite effect, but it is scary to like jump off that cliff the first time. So. Yeah, for sure. So, well, this has been so good for me, and what good news this week. Yeah, exciting. So good. All right, well, have a great week and continue to be really well. Like, thank you. You too. Really well. Really well. That's my prayer for everyone, is to go beyond just being COVID well to being really, really well. Yeah. Amen. Thanks, Jerusalem. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye.